Okay, so we're going to get started. Again, thanks everybody for being here. My name is Kevin Johnson, and I work with cities as a consultant around leadership development, strategic planning, council development, culture development. And I've had the fortune of getting to know Leslie over the last year or so, and we're working on a few things together. But Leslie, if you want to tune in with your audio, and then I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll get rolling.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie Black. I am the city manager in the City of Whitehouse. I've been here for almost 6 years now. It's gone by quickly. But I've been in local government for the past 18 years. Prior cities include Sunnyvale, Kaufman, and Belton. And just happy to be a part of this little session today.
Well, it's good to have you, Leslie. Tell us the size of White House.
Our population is right at around 9,500. We've had about 20% growth in the last 5 years.
Okay, a lot of growth. Okay, so today's topic is building trust. So let's start with internal trust. Um, how coming in, you've been there how long at White House?
Almost 6 years now.
So let's just talk from a high level. When you got there, what were some things you looked to do to establish trust with your internal team and you?
I think for me, it always starts with building a relationship first. The department directors that were here didn't know me and I didn't know them. I came from a city that was a little bit further away, so I didn't have any interaction with any of the staff before I came. And the police chief actually started on the same day that I started. And so not only did they have a new city manager, we had a new police chief. And they had had some turmoil in the past with previous leadership. It had been a few years removed, but there were still, I think, probably some mistrust and misgivings with somebody new coming in. And so for me, it really started with just relationship building, finding out who they are, what their strengths were, and what were some things that we could do to improve together. I did have the mayor that was here when I came. He told me one time, he said, "You're doing a great job, but the bar was really low." And
Okay.
so
Okay.
it was really about how do we raise that bar and how can we do it together? But we started with relationship building at the core of that.
And when you came to White House, again, just to give everyone context, you had been the assistant city manager, correct, in your previous role? And then you came
Yes.
in so coming to White House was your first official city management position.
Correct. Yeah.
Looking back in your career, when it came to establishing trust, what were some lessons you saw that you were like, I'm not going to do that versus these are things I want to do?
I had a lot of, I don't want to do that.
Uh-huh.
The city I came from previously, I think we had 8 different city managers in the span of about 5 years, if you count interims. And so it was high turnover, a lot of mistrust with the staff and up to the council level. And so I think for me, it was most important to just lead with clarity and transparency, and a little bit of vulnerability. I think is
Mhm.
also very important. I certainly didn't come in thinking I knew anything. At the time, our public works director that was here had been with the city for 35 years. If I had come in trying to change his world, it would have never worked. And
Mhm.
so just coming in and making sure that he knew that I thought he was the expert in his field and trusted him to guide us in the right direction worked really well for us in establishing a really strong relationship going forward. So again, I think it just came back to making sure we discussed decisions as a group and people knew where I was coming from if I had to make a decision that I thought they wouldn't all agree with or understand.
Okay. So talk to me about structure, clarity, transparency, organization. That is a key strength of yours. And how has that served you well internally? And then maybe give us the comparison of things you've seen in other environments, other cities, or other organizations where that's not the case and what happens.
So fortunately, when I came into White House, we have a great team. Like I said, they had been through some things and kind of had that survivor mentality and really banded together. We do kind of joke in White House that we're so small, there are no swim lanes. We're all just kind of treading water in the deep end together.
Okay.
So we didn't have a lot of structure and roles necessarily because everybody was wearing multiple hats. And as we've grown, we've tried to kind of divvy some of those things up. But fortunately, we have a great team spirit here. So that has really helped. But I'm very process driven by nature and like structure. I like to know what to expect. And I feel like other people probably appreciate the same. And so the more we can do to communicate that structure and processes and make them a part of our routine, the better it is. One of the things that was mentioned heavily when I was hired here in White House was wanting accountability.
Okay.
And I think some of that may have come from not a disobedient nature of department directors, but just not the processes in place to support accountability. So making those things a part of a routine helps hold people accountable because they know what to expect, they know what to do, they have an understanding of the expectation. That part is key, and it's hard to develop trust if people don't know what the expectation is.
So when they were asking for more accountability and when you're using the word accountability, how are you defining accountability in this case? How would you define that?
I think it just depends, or on what kind of accountability we're talking about. Are we talking about accountability in communication, transparency, performance? I tried to put systems in place across all of those functions of city
Okay.
government. So it means
Cool.
that every Thursday you have an update due that's going to go out to the council and the rest of the leadership team. It means every year you're going to do performance reviews. It means every month we're putting out our key performance indicators to the public. And so just putting those systems in place helps hold each other accountable where I don't even have to say anything if it's missing at this point.
Okay, so that fosters ownership. So the way I'm hearing you define accountability is there's a standard that's been communicated and agreed upon that this is our standard, this is a standard of quality and excellence that is required, and putting the systems in so that's repeatable. Um, okay. Can you think of one example or two of that structure you put in place in your first few years?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do a Friday update. So it goes to the city council and all of our leadership team, and they're free to spread that among the staff as they see fit. Um, but it is a short list of 5 to 10 things that each department accomplished during the week. It's doesn't necessarily have to be newsworthy. It can be as simple as we worked on a water main break at this location to as big as, hey, we accomplished this really big strategic planning item. And it's not really meant to be a workload measure, but it's to keep everybody informed of what we spent our week doing, and how we provided value to our community. It's an internal
Nice.
email only, doesn't go out
Okay.
to our citizens. But we had someone that was really bad about getting that to me at the close of business on Thursday to the point that I was increasingly frustrated. So I started sending it out without their update. They had plenty of warnings, plenty of
Okay.
guidance, and I thought, okay, I'm not running this down anymore. And
Okay.
we haven't had an issue since.
Nice. Nice. They didn't
So,
like they didn't like kind of being exposed that, oh man, where's this director's update?
right. Yeah. And low risk, right? Because it's an internal email.
Correct. Correct.
The council didn't know if they were on vacation or, why necessarily that wasn't included, but the person that was doing it knew why it wasn't included. And
Yeah.
it was an easy way to show kind of the consequences of not following through on a relatively simple stuff.
Correct. Man, it's funny. I've been doing some teaching on accountability, and there are a few components to accountability that have to exist. Number one, clear expectations. Number two, we have to, as a leader or as an organization, make sure we're providing the support and the resources needed so people can succeed. Number three, there needs to be some type of follow through system in place. And then fourth is consequences. And leaders will sometimes struggle with how to provide consequences that aren't punitive, right? We always think of consequences as going to like the HR, writing people up, which is one form, but hopefully it's the last form of consequence. And so what I try to teach is natural consequences, and that's exactly what you're describing there. Is that was a natural consequence that's not going to ruin that person's life or career, but it's letting them feel the weight of not following through. So that's great. Okay, switching gears. So we're still talking about trust, and as a leader, as a city manager, how do we build trust with our internal team? So you've talked about structure, relationships, clarity, accountability. Tell me about tell me about the management plan. Um, Give me a little bit more history on that. I forgot whether that's something you created, the council created.
So I'm going to include a link to it in the chat for anybody that wants to see it. But it was created while they were advertising to fill the role that I'm in now.
Okay.
So the council and some stakeholders got together, and we're kind of reviewing how the city manager role had been functioning, what the weaknesses were previously, and what they wanted to see in the next individual. And that document was probably the key to even getting me to apply in
Okay.
Whitehouse, because I knew their history and kind of some of the things that had happened in the past that weren't the greatest. But it lines out kind of what the council and community's expectations are for communication, accountability, all of those things in the city manager role. And so I was able to quickly look at it and say, yeah, that's how I like to lead and how I like to manage. I think this would be a good fit. And so it was really helpful as an applicant who didn't know much about Whitehouse other than the scandal that maybe had happened previously, to really kind of say this group, the council and staff, have worked together to clearly define their expectations. And I think I could meet those.
And Leslie has mentioned a couple of times kind of this toxic event in the past or scandal, and we're going to make sure your price of admission was worth it. We're going to unpack that a little bit later, and Leslie's going to talk about how they manage that. But we're going to get to that when we shift to external trust. So it sounds like the council learned through some difficult events, and um, so and they defined what they wanted to see in that city management role. And it sounds like that trust process began there with you seeing that plan,
First one was
thought to yourself,
side of the thing for the
I
12.
think if you're on the webinar, maybe just double check your mic to make sure it's muted. Because we don't want to accidentally hear any private information. Um, but you saw that and you said, okay, I know what they're expecting of me. And that started to build trust between you and the council.
Absolutely. I mean, as a city manager, it can be scary too. I was in a position that I loved in a great community. And so, there's a big question. Is it really worth picking up and disrupting our family and moving to this organization that I really know nothing about? But having those clear expectations, goals, communication plan, as someone who's very systems driven, was a very key piece in making sure that this relationship between the city of Whitehouse and me as an individual was successful.
That's key. And so, yeah, you want to, and obviously it's in your nature, but then you want to do the same thing for your people, right? The leaders you're leading. Are you clearly defining what success looks like for them, what they're going to be accountable to? It's hard as a leader to hit a moving target. And so just in your work as a city manager, you're very connected with the associations. I know you're very involved with the local chapter here of of the TCMA. Have you heard that, maybe that murmur from city managers that sometimes their councils do give them a moving target?
Oh, absolutely. Or there's not clear consensus among the group of council members as well. That can be increasingly difficult to manage.
What advice would you give a city manager that's in that, like, in that spot? They didn't have the luxury of coming into a very well-defined management plan.
Yeah, that can be tough. I think it depends on the council member. I think if you're not doing at least quarterly meetings individually with each council member, I would recommend that you do that. Because I think it just helps to build that relationship and that trust between the two of you. And then, there are still times that I have council members, even though we have this great, well thought out management plan and strategic plan, who still kind of diverge from that plan and want us to reallocate
Okay.
resources in a direction that maybe not isn't the priority of the council as a whole. And the question to that is, okay, where do you think this falls in amongst all these other projects on the priority level? And if it's vastly different than what I think the rest of the council would say, well, I think then we need to take that to the body as a whole for them to help reprioritize this list of projects.
Nice.
So that's kind of my approach to that.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is, well, in this case, if you're sensing they're diverging, you'll ever so politely kind of bring back the list of priorities and say, okay, where do you want me to fit that in this list? To kind of
Yeah,
remind.
let's take a look at those.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay. Um,
Or it can be as simple as, well, if we take that on, this other thing is gonna have to be put on hold. It just depends on the complexity of however we're veering off, but, yeah, one of these things is gonna have to be put on the back burner, and let's have a discussion about what that looks like.
okay. Okay. Talk to me about building trust with potential employees or candidates for the city itself. So we all know that, well, Leslie's lucky enough, she has an unlimited budget to pay people. But for most people, their city has a limited budget and they can't pay top dollar. So what are some practical things you have looked at doing to try to attract good talent?
So first, I will say it starts with a conversation with our department directors. So the needs in recruiting for the police department in particular right now are very different than some of our other departments. And so it starts with a conversation of who is our target. So for police right now, our target are those that have been in law enforcement for 10 plus years. And so we have a very different recruiting strategy for police than we do most of our other city departments. But a couple of things that we've done citywide to build trust. One, if it's a department director level interview, I will send a couple of questions to them ahead of time. So if there are really important things that are going to impact my hiring decision heavily, I will send them the question ahead of time so that they can be prepared to answer it, because it's not about surprising them. It's not even necessarily about what you know off the top of your head. It's, can you look at this Parks and Trails plan and give me an idea of how you would implement that going forward? And can you speak to that in a way that our public is going to respond to? And so wanting to make sure that they have plenty of time to prepare and answer that question in a meaningful way. And I think that helps build trust so that they know it's not a gotcha kind of moment. It's,
Mhm.
can we build a relationship together that's going to serve this community?
Mhm. Nice. Okay.
But then, yeah,
So you send some questions to try to give them a realistic picture of what they're walking into, and you want to see how well they can think through and their actual viable plan. Okay.
and then some other things that we've done, we've started giving employees 5 days of vacation on their first day. So
Okay.
once you're hired, you have a week's worth of vacation. You won't accrue anymore for the first 6 months, but as I mentioned, with us trying to recruit mid to late career, particularly in police, we obviously don't have an unlimited budget, but how can we how can we help make someone already in the field decide to leave their current position and come here? What are
Right.
they having to give up to jump that hurdle? How can
Okay.
we ease that transition? And so it's not about, oh, we think you're going to abuse this time while you're still under probation. No, we trust that life doesn't stop just because you've taken on a new role. And how can we partner with you in that, so that you're not having to give something up to come here?
That's a great idea. You think about someone, yeah, mid-career, let's say they've accumulated 2, 3, 4 weeks of vacation. They make a move to join your team. Now they can't take vacation for a year. That's a tough ask for someone with a family,
Right.
right?
And then we also allow them to earn and accrue vacation based on their years of service with TMRS or the military, whatever. So
Okay.
if you have 20 years in another city, you're at our highest vacation accrual on day one.
Okay. Good. Did you get any pushback?
Done.
Okay. What could someone push back? Imagine another director or a council member somewhere pushing back on that.
Sure. I think, for someone to come in, have only worked here for a year and find out that they're earning 4 weeks of vacation, after they've been here a year, can be, I could see where it would be a hard sell to the public, but before pushback comes up, we want to be clear and transparent about our reason for doing so. And so our council and community knew we had had trouble recruiting police officers, just like every other city in the state. Police is also our biggest area of risk, as a city. And so we don't necessarily want people straight out of the academy if we can get law enforcement officers with 10+ years of experience. So on our pay scales, we pay more, significantly more on the top end of that experience range. I mean, it's a very concerted effort to make sure that we're hiring the right people. And to do that, we need to treat them professionally, pay them professionally, and have benefits that represent their professional experience. And
Nice.
we didn't get any pushback, but we told that story for a long time before we ever made the ask. And so I think that's a really important piece of it as well. And that's why we're the 26th safest city in Texas today.
Let's go.
Yeah.
You get
So
that,
we're really
like,
proud of.
you got a notice today?
No, but that's where we stand
You're just saying
today.
today. Okay. Yes.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah. We're
Well,
really
and
proud of that.
that's very significant coming from the thing you had in the past, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Last question about internal trust. Talk to me about your culture, team dynamics. How do you keep that healthy? Because not all team dynamics are healthy.
I think it all starts with having the right people in place. If they're not the right people, particularly internal, right? I don't have any control over who's on our council, but the internal piece of it, if you are not a good fit for our culture, you can't work here. And we've made that very clear. It's something that is a part of our performance evaluations. In so much that, do you have a heart for service? And that includes internal and external customers, is a big question, as a part of the performance review. I will tell you, the people that were here when I came here and are still here today, they do a lot of the culture work. All I have to do is stay out of their way.
Okay.
So when we went into COVID and couldn't have an employee banquet, we bought a Blackstone, and our staff went out and cooked breakfast outside because we were, like everybody else, still coming to work, packaged it up into to-go boxes on every Friday and delivered it to all the departments.
Wow.
And we continue Friday breakfasts today. Not every Friday, but once a month, each department takes a turn just cooking breakfast for all the other departments. So like I said, a lot of it is just saying yes when the ask is made, or finding a way to continue community internally, regardless of what's happening externally. So because of COVID and we couldn't do our banquet, let's find a way to still make sure that we're serving each other,
Okay.
in a meaningful way.
Okay. All right, let's switch in our balance of time to external trust. So now how does the city build trust with its constituents? Talk to me about this concept that you all have called the Interagency Council. Talk about the origin of that, the purpose, and then how that functions and what it provides.
I have to be honest, on the Interagency Council, it was not something I loved at first. It is something that is identified in the management plan and was probably one of the last things I instituted when I came on board, because being very systems and process driven, it was hard for me to see the value. So the way that works for us is all of the heads of nonprofits or organizations that serve people in Whitehouse get together once a month for lunch, and we just kind of do a roundtable meeting. What do you have going on? Do you have any obstacles? Do you need any resources from anyone else in the room? So,
So
for example,
real quick, let's like rattle off some examples of kinds of organizations at that table.
the school districts there, the Education Foundation, Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development, sports associations, Keep Whitehouse Beautiful, the Farmers Market. We have a therapeutic equestrian nonprofit right outside of town. Our mental health organization here locally is a part of that. We're up to about 20 to 25 different community organizations. Our local food pantry is a part of that conversation, the library, and several others. And
Nice.
so we
Okay.
just meet monthly, and it will just be 2 or 3 things that you have going on, and if you need any help from anyone else in the room. And so for me, it was very hard because there's no measurable output of those monthly meetings, right? I can't put that on a KPI. We sat around and had lunch for an hour. But it has been one of the most beneficial things that we've done, because in doing so, we've created 20 to 25 ambassadors for each other's organizations. It's hard to sit down and have a meal with someone once a month and not see the value in who they are as a person and the value that they have as an organization to our community. And so we've really kind of created champions for those 20 to 25 organizations. And so when they hear something about the city, they've heard it straight from my mouth, the facts of whatever's going on, and vice versa. I know that Starbright Equestrian Therapeutics Center has broken ground on a new indoor barn, and here's why. Here's how many kids they're serving. I know that Meals on Wheels is delivering 600 to 700 meals in our community every month, but now they're frozen. And so do we have anybody that needs a microwave because of their funding cuts? So it is, it's not like, again, at first it was really frustrating to me because it's not anything I can report out on. But when you sit around that room once a month and see the resources that have been shared and the opportunities that have been gained from that group, it's been exponential.
That's great. I love that concept. Okay, let's move to the juicy part. I know that there was some unfortunate events in the city prior to your being there. We don't have to get into the details of that, but talk to me about the impact that had on the community, and then what you and the council did in the wake of that to rebuild the city's reputation.
Yeah, and I'll kind of talk briefly about what happened. So our police chief and city manager at the time were involved in an incident with another police officer's estranged wife. It was quite the kerfuffle, and really, was all over the news here locally, of course, and was quite the topic of conversation at the local coffee shop and everywhere else. And so in rebuilding that, I think that was probably one of the big reasons why the council wanted to do the management plan when they were bringing me on, so that they could show to the community, hey, here's what we're going for, and here's our expectation. We are no longer going to allow someone in this position that's going to behave the way they had in the past. To your point earlier, Kevin, that was really kind of where they first started rebuilding that trust and lining out those expectations of what they hoped would help turn that around. And that included a big piece on the external communications plan.
Okay, so yeah, tell us about that. That external
Yeah.
communication.
So one of the things that I had done in a prior city that I continued here was weekly email newsletters to our citizens, to whoever signed up. They go out every Friday. And we have gained more public trust through that than any other. They come from my email address. So they can respond directly back to me if anybody has any questions. And that has really been the key. That also carried us through Winter Storm Uri. We used that same email distribution list to send twice daily updates. Our city was without water for 4 days during Winter Storm Uri. And so for our public to be able to expect a morning update and an evening update every day was above and beyond what any other city around us was doing. And so we heard more positive feedback during that time than we've heard at any other point.
So that newsletter, I know that what's your distributorship with that newsletter? Do you have an idea?
I think we're up to around, I think we get about 800 views every
Okay.
week.
Okay. And I don't know what the stats are, but at a local election, it's a very small percentage that actually show up to vote, right? Just like
Right.
city to city, right? There are exceptions. And so you're going to have that 10% of your population that's very much in the know, wants to know. And it sounds like you're able to communicate with that percentage of your population via this newsletter. Is that
Right.
correct?
And yeah, and we know with that email newsletter, we're not subject to any kind of algorithm like we are on social media. And so we find the open rate is significantly higher from the email subscribers than when we post it on social media.
Okay. Okay. Talk to me more about transparency and proactive communication with the city, and maybe some examples of maybe going back to the police where you were going to provide that PTO and you give other outside years of experience, you credit them and give them their highest PTO bank. How, like, you can use that as an example or another one. Give me an example of transparent, proactive communication that's helped prepare the public for a change or an initiative.
So my staff here would tell you that I start on initiatives usually about a year before we ever ask the council for anything.
Okay.
So if it's something that we have the potential for public pushback on, we start pushing out pieces of that information probably at least a year in advance. So we talked about the police recruitment problem for at least a year before we made our ask for that, so that we could show that we had clearly defined information on why that was important. And it wasn't anything new that our community hadn't heard. It was us coming to the table with solutions to a problem that we had been talking about for quite some time. I do the same thing with leadership transitions for roles. So we just got our first ever economic development executive director, and she transitioned from our director of development. And bless her heart, she served kind of in both roles for at least a year, probably closer to 18 months. But when we got ready to make that change, there was no question. By the time we got ready for them to actually take a vote, they were like, why are we still talking about this? She's been doing the job. And so we had proven our case long before we ever officially made the ask. And I think that's been a really key part of how we've been able to move forward in a way that builds trust, because again, no one is surprised by that. We've been making that case long before we ever make the ask.
Nice. So going back to the police, like, so what did a year's worth of communication look like?
It meant talking about how many vacancies we've had. It meant
Is that like on
comparing our,
on your newsletter, or where are these outlets that you're?
we mostly did that just with the council, not a ton with the public, but they saw the now hiring postings, so it wasn't so blatant as Oh man, we have 5 vacancies because we run into some officer safety concerns if we start talking about we're really low staffed. But they saw the now hiring and why are we continuing to hire police officers? And so any chance we got, we were having that conversation. And fortunately, that one is a nationwide conversation. It's not just here. So anybody that wants to know can easily find the information on why that's been difficult. But they saw that. They knew that the school resource officer in their kid's school had changed or was vacated. And so working closely also with the school district to help with that information was a key piece because I think we have 19 sworn officers and 5 of those are school resource officers. So they're a big portion of our sworn staff. Um, but just communicating that in ways that we would normally communicate with the public, but also they're just seeing it over and over and over again. And so we were able to come up with solutions that we didn't have any pushback on.
Nice. Okay, one last question, and then we'll open it up for questions to the group. So group, get your questions ready and you'll just unmute and you can ask Leslie directly or you can send it in the chat. I think I know how you're going to answer this, but if you could give advice to another city manager trying to strengthen trust, either internally or externally, what would you tell them?
Dedicate a lot of time and a lot of patience to it. I think one of the things, I don't waste time on people that don't also want to build trust with me.
Okay.
So there are some citizens in your community that they're never going to trust you, right? That's just the world that we live in today. I can be the nicest, sweetest little city manager out on your neighborhood street, and it's not going to matter. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I will be respectful, treat them the same way I would any other citizen, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time trying to build trust that isn't going to exist. With citizens, if you have people that are kind of on the line or uninformed, and so that may be where their distrust is coming from,
Okay.
I will spend a significant amount of time with those individuals. So we have a guy that runs our local Facebook group page. Everybody has one, and you know who I'm talking about. And he would be very quick to share the negative sometimes. Well, one day he posted a positive on something that we at the city had done. We had installed a new sign, and he was very lengthy on why he loved it and the great job we had done. I sent him a handwritten note card that I mailed it. I looked up his address. He doesn't actually live in the city, but I just said, hey, thank you so much. In a world where it's so easy to blast the negative, you don't know how much we hold on to the positive on these types of things. Thank you so much for the kind words. Now, before he will repost a negative post, he sends it to me by email and gives me a chance to respond, and he will post my response as his own.
Wow.
Because I sent him a handwritten note card. I took 5 minutes. So that's where the really high impact building trust comes into play, are the people that are just probably uninformed on all the things that cities are doing and how their words impact city employees and staff. And so that has been a huge game changer. I try to send 3 to 5 note cards a week if I can, to not only those that are distrustful, but those that trust us as well.
Yeah.
If we do a project in someone's yard, I send them a note afterwards that just says, hey, thanks so much for your patience on this. Glad we were able to get it resolved. If you have any issues going forward, here's my office number. And we're creating champions out of those people by just taking a little bit of extra time to say thank you.
So do you have a KPI on that? How many cards per week?
No,
I'm
no,
joking.
I don't.
Um,
I could.
Don't put it past you, right?
Yeah.
That took some humility, Leslie. I could see how someone in your seat in the city management role, you just roll your eyes at that Facebook guy, right? But that took humility to accentuate the positive, and you really established a friend there. So that's great. That's great. Okay, we've got a few minutes left, so I'll open it up to the group. And thank you everyone for attending. I hope so far it's been valuable, encouraging, inspiring. So we'll open it up for questions. All right, I've got a question. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, you're getting a shout out.
Thanks, Robert.
Oh, yeah, Robert. So as you're thinking about your questions and to ask, just put it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. I want to go back to, Leslie, the question, if I'm a city manager and I have a council member who's just not with the program, maybe they're operating on their own agenda. And thankfully you're not in that situation and haven't been in that situation in Whitehouse. But let's say magically you were somewhere else and you had that one kind of rogue council member. What would be your strategy to navigate that?
So I think one of the things that I've learned here and really appreciate is that I have a mayor who is willing to help navigate that with me. And so because they've all come together and adopted a really good strategic plan and a management plan, when I go back to those documents and say, but that's not what you as a group said was important to you in here. The mayor, I've gone to the mayor a couple of times and just said, hey, I really need some help with this. I've tried to handle this and I'm not really getting anywhere. Is this something that you and the particular council member and I can sit down and discuss? Or if it's to the point that even that wouldn't be productive, the mayor and council in our organization have gone into an executive session to discuss it as a group. And those have been beneficial too, either with or without me in the room. And so they as a group can decide how they want to move forward. So if there are things that aren't working well, it's usually been handled with the mayor having a conversation with that council member, or if they needed to go into executive session to discuss it, I've seen that done as well. Again, I wouldn't waste a lot of time or energy. You know, everybody on this call knows if you have a city council member that is not going to be swayed or corrected by that action. You know, there are some that's just not possible, and I understand that. But if you have some that are just veering off course because that's just who they are, they don't know better, it's not from a place of malicious intent, then I think that can be helpful course correction from either the mayor or the council as a body.
So it sounds like that strategic plan is a key foundational piece to a successful or strong trust between the council and the city manager, and then the city manager and her team.
It is for me in the way I operate, for sure. Because that's what you've told me is important to you. We spend a lot of money and time on strategic plans. So if that's not what our focus should be, then we need to change the strategic plan, and the council as a group needs to agree to that.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, you're getting another shout out.
Oh man, we should do this every day.
I know, man. It's a boost. Chris's college roommate works for the Whitehouse Police Department. He speaks very highly of you and your leadership. Okay, here's a question. In your experience, what's the biggest barrier to trust in local government, and how have you worked to overcome it?
So I think it's probably what we're seeing kind of just trickle down from the federal and state level these days, is that it's kind of cool to not trust the government these days. But I think again, it goes back to relationship building. I had to go out and meet with a very upset homeowner last week, and it started with, she said I was too lazy to get out from my desk and my contract wasn't worth the paper it was written on. And I said, well,
Oh my.
Miss Lady, I'll be by there at 5 o'clock. I've got some things to finish up, but just so you know, I've got to bring my son with me because he's got somewhere he's got to be after school. So I go out there, and I think it was just a good reminder that I'm a person too. And so my son's 13, so he's old enough to know that people aren't always happy with mom, and it wasn't a big shock or anything. And so, but it did help because another parent who knew my son drove by and said, hey, aren't you supposed to be heading to baseball? Completely unscripted. It couldn't have worked any better. But it was just a great reminder that we're people too, and we're out here doing the best we can, and we're giving things up to serve our community. And it doesn't always work out that well, but it really served me well. And so I think meeting people at their home, but also just reminding them that we're people too, just doing the best we can. We don't always get it right. But it's a whole lot easier to yell at me over the phone than it is out on a street, with my kids standing next to me. While we're
Correct.
giving something up for him to meet with you and address your issue. And
Right.
so there are some subtle ways that we can send those reminders to people that I think help, and just being present in the community at all
Mhm.
different kinds of things and treating people the same regardless of how they treat me.
Nice. Nice. Yep. That takes character. Okay. Here's another question. You talked a lot about building trust with other people, and how to meet them at their level. How did you yourself learn to trust others?
I think for me, once, most people are inherently good, right? It's the place where I come from. Most people don't do bad things intentionally. So trying to understand where they're coming from, particularly internally. Um, so, I don't think it will come as a surprise to anybody on here that police officers are inherently distrustful of other people. I'm married to one, so I know. And so understanding that when we make policy changes, they're inherently distrustful of that. How can we mitigate that? How can I prove to them this is my heart and this is where I'm coming from, and it's not to punish you? And so I think getting to know people and just understanding what their view is going to be in the best way that we can. And usually until you disprove me, I'm going to trust that you're coming at it from an honest place and a forthcoming place. But it also means that I can't blow up when you disagree. And it also means that we're actively seeking out those that think about things differently than I do.
Mhm.
So if I know I have someone that is maybe going to be distrustful of a policy, I'll run it by them first. Hey, what are your thoughts on this? What perspective am I not seeing that you can help me with from
Mhm.
the beginning?
Mhm. Do
And
you see this
then
next question? The mayor and one commissioner want to do a charter amendment to make it where he can do business with the city. The mayor, I'm assuming. He is a local plumber. The charter currently forbids it. I think this is going to cultivate suspicion within the public. Is there state law that would prohibit it?
I don't know that there's one that would prohibit it. I do think there's a requirement to do a conflict of interest and an abstention from the vote. So even if the charter amendment were to pass, so first you'd have to have a charter commission, I'm assuming based on however your charter is written. Your charter commission would then have to propose amendments to the council. The council would then have to approve it going on the ballot. Your voters would then have to approve the opportunity. And then it would come to council for them to do business as a contract, and that commissioner or mayor would have to abstain based on a bona fide conflict of interest with the state. So there are a whole lot of steps, it sounds like, just kind of based on what you've typed, that would have to happen um, before they could even take a vote on it to do business. So I don't know that I have any advice other than, we're going through charter amendments. We have 9 propositions on the ballot right now. And we were very particular in who we put on that commission, but we didn't have an instance where a particular person was trying to get a very specific thing through. So my approach to that would be, hey, Mayor and Commissioner, I just want to make sure we're not putting you in a position that you feel like you have to vote on this that's going to get you in trouble and come back and kind of bite you. Let me run it by the city attorney and just make sure that everything's good, and would kind of put it back on the attorney.
Good question. Okay.
One of the
yeah.
other questions, Kevin, real quick, was how did you build a community of people that you trusted? Or would you say that every time someone trusted you, that it was automatically reciprocated with you trusting them? I think I wouldn't say it was automatically reciprocated. And I think trust kind of goes back to understanding where people are coming from. So that department director that wasn't sending in his weekly update, right? It wasn't because he was saying, city manager, I don't care what you say, I'm not going to do this. It was just because it wasn't a priority for him. Was I frustrated? Absolutely. But it wasn't from a place of malintent. And so it was, how can we build in consequences that will remove either systems or consequences that will remove the frustration for both him and I. And so, systems weren't working, so we moved on to consequences. But it's hard for me to believe that somebody is coming from a bad place. I've had people in my life in the past that have done that. And at that point, it's just hard for me to have any type of relationship
Sure.
with that individual.
Sure. Okay, good. Okay. Well, Leslie, thank you for your time. Thank you everyone for attending. To just recap why we're doing this, one of the things I've heard in meeting with various city leaders throughout the state is some of the more rural areas can have a challenge accessing professional development for whatever reason. And so, as a firm, we want to provide a resource to those areas that can sometimes have difficulty accessing professional development. And we thought this was basically a no cost but easy accessible way to be inspired, educated, and refreshed in their role of city management. And so, Leslie, thanks for being our first interviewee and kicking this program off.
For having me.
Yes, and good luck to everybody this week. Have a good week. Feel free to shoot me an email. You RSVP'd to me. Feel free to shoot me an email with any feedback on topics you would like to see discussed, any ideas you have for this ongoing city management webinar series. We'd love the feedback to make it more meaningful and more valuable. So Leslie, thank you. Have a good rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.